In this video, I'm going to cover various methods of checking neck relief. And a lot of people in particular want to know how to get a numerical measurement for neck relief instead of just eyeballing it. And we're going to cover all of that. For the sake of the video, and so you can see my face while I'm talking and not have a guitar in front of everything, I'm going to be doing the adjustments with the guitar on its back. Just keep in mind that when you have the guitar on its back, gravity is going to pull everything down a little bit. So you're going to get a lower relief reading than you would get with the guitar in the playing position. Except for special circumstances, I always make relief adjustments with the strings on and tuned to pitch. And just as a quick tip before we begin, for Fender style adjusters, my favorite brand of Allen wrench are these Wera Hex Plus Allen wrenches. They're awesome. They have a little bit of an extra grab, so you're less likely to strip the adjuster. I also got a piece of aluminum dowel and drilled a hole in the middle of it so I can slip it over that Allen wrench. That means I can use it the long way, so this handle up here is completely out of the way of the strings. If you use it the typical way, you're going to be crashing in to your middle strings, and oftentimes you have to loosen them to make the adjustment and then tune them back up. When you slip this over the end, you get plenty of leverage, and you completely clear the strings, so you can make any amount of adjustment you have to either way. This is also great for adjusting truss rods on acoustic guitars where that adjuster nut is recessed way inside the sound hole and you can't reach it the other way. The only caveat is sometimes the body on the Wera Hex Plus wrenches is a little too thick to fit on those, so sometimes you got to use a more traditional Allen wrench. So with those little tips out of the way, let's dive right in to different ways of measuring neck relief. First, we'll go over my personal favorite tool for checking neck relief, the digital neck relief gauge from G-Tech Guitars on eBay. The way that it works on guitar is it spans the 1st fret here, the 17th fret here, and this probe measures the neck relief at the 7th fret. On long scale bases, I put one end on the 3rd fret, the other end at the 15th fret, and then the probe measures the neck relief at the 8th fret. You zero this tool out on a surface plate or a precision sanding beam, which means you get this end down, that end down, and you push the probe down so everything is perfectly flat, perfectly even, then you push the 0 button. So that's your reference point, is when that probe is perfectly even, within 1/1000th of an inch of these two ends. So what that means is this probe is going to be pushed up or have to come down, depending on whether the neck is in a forward bow or a back bow. I'll demonstrate how this works with a piece of string, which is how Steve Kubecka, my friend and mentor, taught me about neck relief many years ago. So if the neck is forward bowed, it's going to look like this. Notice how the string's contacting here, and it's contacting here. It's not contacting the probe. This is a forward bow. That means the probe has to come down to touch the string, and that's going to give you a positive reading. Now, if you bring the string up, this is like tightening the truss rod. So here the truss rod's too loose, we got a ton of relief, and as you tighten it, it straightens out, and then we're back to our 0 position. I know this isn't perfect as I'm holding the string here, but just imagine, right? Perfectly straight, perfectly even. Now as we move away, right, the neck's going into more and more of a forward bow. It's getting pulled into more and more of a curvature, so the probe would have to come down farther and you get a bigger reading. So as an example, let's say we're at 0 right here, right? The neck is dead straight. Now we're at like 0.005. Now we're at 10. Now we're at 15, 20, 30. I mean, it's going crazy, right? But it's increasing as we go down. Now I know this isn't perfect. I had to tape the string here. If the neck is back bowed, notice how the string isn't touching either end of the tool, but the probe is touching in the middle. So that means the neck is curved upward. Now if I push this down until either end of the tool touches the string on either end, the probe is going to come up. It's going to be pushed up and give you a negative reading. So the more curved this is, the farther that probe is going to get pushed up and the greater the negative reading will be. So -0.002 is like a slight back bow. As you go -5, 10, whatever, that's a much more severe back bow. So remember, A negative reading on the digital neck relief gauge means the neck is in a back bow. A positive reading means it's in a forward bow. Dead straight means 0, 0.00. So on this base, I'm at about negative 3/1000ths of relief, which means this base is in 3/1000ths of a back bow. Now I'm also going to measure the bass side and the treble side. I always do bass, middle, and treble for 3 relief measurements. And the reason I do that is to test for any twists in the neck. So here I'm measuring between the E string and the A string, negative 3/1000ths. I'm measuring between the A string and the D string, that's negative 3/1000ths. And then I'm measuring between the D string and the G string, and that's negative 3/1000ths. So we're in a uniform 3/1000ths back bow on this neck. If you get significantly different readings on the bass, middle, and treble relief, the neck's got a twist in it. So an example would be 0 bass, 0 middle, and then you're in negative 5/1000ths on the treble side. So that would be a bit of a twist in the neck. Anyway, this neck is in 3/1000ths of a back bow. So to correct that, using the digital neck relief gauge, I've got my adjuster wrench loaded in here, and I'm going to turn the adjuster counterclockwise to loosen the truss rod. That means the adjuster being up here at the headstock, and I'm looking at it head on like this. We're going counterclockwise to loosen it. And that's going to back off tension. Now I'm going to measure this with the digital neck relief gauge, and I'm going to go until I hit my desired amount of relief. In this case, I want it at 0. I want the neck as close to dead straight as possible, so I'm going to adjust this until I come from that negative 3/1000ths to as close to 0 as possible. This tool is my favorite. It's the fastest. I can't imagine it being any easier. If you can think of any caveats, anything to watch out for that might be wrong with this, let me know in the comment section. Because for the past couple years, I've been using this tool almost exclusively to set neck relief with nothing but great results. Now we'll go over another method for checking neck relief. So perhaps the most popular one is putting a capo at the 1st fret and then holding down one of the strings wherever the neck joins the body. So in this case, that's at about the 17th fret. Then you want to look at around the 7th fret, which is about the halfway point between these 2 points, and look for a gap of light between the top of the fret and the bottom of the string. You can also use your finger to tap. So if there is a gap, you'll see it close up as you tap the string. You can also very quickly and easily go up and down each separate string. So you're checking the relief in multiple locations, as I suggested earlier. Now for years, I just used my fingertips. So you hold it down at the 1st fret, you hold it down wherever the neck joins the body, and you look for the relief around the 7th fret. However, using the capo will free your hands up, which is really good if you want to use things like a jeweler's loupe. If you have astigmatism, like I do, or your eyesight in general just isn't what it used to be. So this makes it much easier to see up close. You get a really good macro view, much closer than you'd ever be able to see otherwise. And that makes it very, very clear. Now for one more trick, you can use a popsicle stick. So for example, I can thread this under the E string, over the A, and under the D at the 17th fret. And now the A string is effectively capoed at the 17th fret, as well as at the 1st fret. So now both hands are free. I can take the jeweler's loupe, I'm right around the 7th fret, and I can tap it with my finger to see that gap a little better. And that also segues into the next method, which is much, much easier to do with both hands free. We're using feeler gauges instead of just eyeballing it and tapping the string. These tools are used by feel, as the name would imply. They're made of different thicknesses, and you want to use a thickness that will slip over the top of the fret and under the bottom of the string without lifting the string up. And the general method for doing that is to find a feeler gauge that just barely lifts the string a little bit with a little bit of resistance, and then go down to a smaller size from there. The next smallest size that just barely slips under the string without lifting it up is your relief measurement. So with the popsicle stick acting as a capo at the 17th fret and the capo at the 1st fret, I'm going to slip this feeler gauge under the string at the 7th fret. Now what I'm looking for and feeling for is just a little bit of resistance with no movement of the string. So just the slightest bit of resistance. And if you really want to get crazy with it, again, you can use the jeweler's loupe to get a really good close-up look. So I can feel the gauge going up against the underside of the string. It's riding along the top of the fret, and I can feel it under the string, contacting it, but it's not lifting it up. It's not lifting it up at all. So for the sake of this video, I can test the feeler gauges against the digital neck relief gauge. So with a capo holding the string down at the 1st fret, and a popsicle stick holding the string down at the 17th fret, I put the digital neck relief gauge on. It's spanning frets 3 to 15 on this long scale bass, and I'm measuring the relief at the 8th fret. And this is coming out to about 4.5 to 5 thousandths. Now I get out my feeler gauges and slip a 5 thousandths under that string at the 8th fret. Now I can feel resistance, but it is a little hard for me to see. So I've got my jeweler's loupe, and it is not moving that string at all, but I feel just a little bit of resistance. So if you want to be doubly sure, you can go the next size up, which in this case is 6 thousandths on the set that I have, and I can see that that is definitely moving the string. You can even feel it. And you might have to get close with that jeweler's loupe to really see what's going on. So while I prefer this method, this does work with the feeler gauges if it's the only tool you have available, and they're certainly cheaper. Now before moving forward, I have one more test to demonstrate that uses the feeler gauges. And that is with a straight edge. So I'm going to take off the capo, and I'm going to remove the popsicle stick, because the straight edge is going to go right along the fret tops. So we are no longer using the string as a straight edge, so we don't have to hold anything down at either end. Straight edges are also heavy and solid pieces of steel that have a much better tactile feel when using feeler gauges. So unlike a really flimsy string, even a bass string, you're going to have a very easy time finding the correct feeler gauge size, and you don't need a jeweler's loupe to get a closer look to do it. However, there are a couple caveats. So the first one is you can't use this in the playing position. You can put the straight edge into position, but then you need a free hand to get your feeler gauges out, and your other hand has to hold it in position over here. So that's not going to happen, holding this in the playing position. So that's the first caveat. The second caveat is notice that this is not a full-length straight edge. At least not for a bass. This is full length for a guitar. But using it here on this long scale bass, I am spanning from frets 1 to 15. So it's not quite going to where the neck joins the body, but it's almost there. It's pretty close. Now if I measure around the 8th fret and try to replicate the measurement I was getting with the digital neck relief gauge and using the string as a straight edge with the feeler gauges, I am getting just about exactly the same measurement, about 4.5 to 5 thousandths. Now, if I take a full-length straight edge, so this is for long scale basses, and I put that on here, so we're spanning every single fret, and I get my feeler gauges back out, and we check the relief again, I'm getting about 3 thousandths more relief than I was getting with the other tests. So that includes the digital neck relief gauge and the feeler gauge test using the string as a straight edge. So to keep things simple, don't worry about it. Don't worry about why or what caused the full-length straight edge to get a different reading. Just remember 1st fret to about where the neck joins the body, and just stick with that. So if you're going to use a straight edge for checking neck relief, just span from the 1st fret to about where the neck joins the body, and just leave it at that. Full-length straight edges are very helpful for setting the fret tops as straight as possible when you're preparing for fretwork. But that we're going to get way out into the weeds if I start talking about that. So, let's go to the next method. The final measurement tool, and another one that's perfect for using with both hands free, again, using that popsicle stick method, is the digital action gauge. So this has a free-falling probe. What you do is you put it over the string, you let the probe fall onto the string, you zero it out, and then you press down on the probe. As you press the probe down, it's pressing the string down and it's closing up the gap between the bottom of the string and the top of the fret. So for example, if you get 7 thousandths, that would mean that there's 7 thousandths between the bottom of the string and the top of the fret, because that's how far the probe had to push the string down to close up the gap. And don't forget our friend gravity. So I already mentioned you're going to be wanting to do these measurements in the playing position anyway, but just so you're aware, with the digital action gauge, gravity is going to have a double impact. So it's not only pulling down on the neck of the strings, which is going to change your measurement, but it's pulling down on the free-falling probe of the digital action gauge. So when you put it on top of the string, before you zero out the gauge, gravity is pulling down on it, and that could be pushing your string down more before you zero out the gauge. So your measurement could be way off if you do it with the guitar on its back. So just remember our friend gravity and take the measurements in the playing position. Alright guys, so that's a wrap for this video, and hopefully you understand why I am so attracted to this tool. Not in that kind of way, in a very platonic technical way. Putting it on the 3rd to 15th fret on this long scale bass, and I get my relief measurement right there. So I'm right at about 4 thousandths. It's that quick. You just put it on, you get the measurement, you're done. You can make your truss rod adjustment. Now you can imagine how much my head was spinning as I was trying to explain all these other methods that other people may want to use that I don't personally use. Because I just use this, it's super fast, super easy, but I do understand that not everybody can afford those tools. And there's a lot of people that might be watching this that aren't professional guitar techs. They're just sitting at home, they want to know how to tweak the truss rod and like how to measure the adjustments that they're making to know what they're doing. And for most people that's going to be limited to feeler gauges, a capo, and a popsicle stick. I think that's a pretty small ask for most guitarists. Like you're sitting at home, I'm like, do you have a capo? Yeah, you might have to run out to the hardware store and spend $10 to get a set of feeler gauges, but that is going to be the lowest investment you could possibly make for getting an accurate, actual numerical measurement of your neck relief. So, I hope this helped. I hope you learned something, and I hope you're able to improve the accuracy of your setups by making the transition to numerical measurements. I'm a big advocate for that. I know a lot of people adjust guitars by feel. That's the way I was taught, was to set guitars up by feel. I mean, I didn't measure action for many years. I don't even remember how many years I went before I started measuring things. And then more recently, like the past few years, I made the switch to digital. So most of the time I've been doing this, which is around 20 years. 20 years is a little longer than I've been doing it, but we're coming up on 20 years. I was doing everything by feel, by hand and eye. Right? I was taught first and last fret, just look at the gap around the 8th fret, and then adjust the truss rod accordingly. And then same thing with the nut slots. It's like you feel them, they look a little high, they feel high. You take them down until they feel good. And I still do that. Now I verify it with a digital action gauge. And then same for the string action up here. So I have done things by hand and eye, by feel, for most of the time that I've been doing this. But the digital measurements just took things to a whole new level. And I'm really glad I delved into that world. And now, in my opinion, my setups are better than ever. They're better than they've ever been, and they're more repeatable than they've ever been. Plus, the utility of these tools, not only the neck relief gauge, but particularly this digital action gauge. So you can measure fret height really quick and easy using this, like you zero it out on the fretboard, and you can measure your fret heights way faster than using calipers like these from StewMac that have a notch for fret height. This tool is infinitely superior for measuring fret height. And then again, action at the 1st fret, you can do your neck relief, and then action at the 12th fret or 17th fret. It can do it all. And it's changed everything. And again, everything is so much more repeatable now that I've gone digital. And like I can tell you on my personal Strat, I know exactly where I like it. It's like around 10 thousandths on the G, B, and E strings at the 1st fret, around 15 to 18 thousandths EAD on the 1st fret. Then open at the 12th fret, around 30 to 34 thousandths. 34 thousandths is a little high for me. Open at the 12th fret on the G, B, and E. Then around like 34 thousandths on the D string, around like 39 to 40 thousandths on the A string, and then around like 46 to 52 thousandths on the low E string. And that's with 0 relief in the neck. So I like my neck relief set at the 7th fret to either 0 to like 1.5 thousandths. I've got everything down to a science with these tools, and I know exactly where I like it. And it also helps you when you're doing customer jobs, because then you know exactly where you set things up, and you know what this person prefers. Like you have some person that might prefer, I've had people that prefer like 10 to 15 thousandths of neck relief. It's got to be, it just has to be that for that person. So there is no right or wrong, there's preference. But it's a great help when you actually have numerical data to look at for what those preferences are. It simplifies everything now. It takes all the mystery out, right? So neck relief is a critical part there, and I don't see people talking about measuring neck relief that often. Usually it's how I learned, where you hold it down at the 1st and the last fret, you eyeball it, and you just kind of set it by feel. And that does work. It does work. But I am a big fan of precision now more than ever, and using digital gauges, or on the lower tech side, feeler gauges, at least for neck relief. You're going to have a lot more of a precise measurement than just doing it by eye. So that's my take anyway. That's the way I roll. Not going to be for everyone, and I will never claim my way is the best way. Except for cutting nut slots. If you've seen my nut slot spacing video, it is the best way. Just a little joke there. Only kind of though. Again, you take how many people are going to cut nuts, and then they'll have the balls to take calipers up to the string slots in between the strings and measure them and find out if they're all exactly the same or not. So you're not going to do that with other methods. So anyway, I've gone on long enough. So hopefully you've learned something, and as always, stay tuned for more guitar everything, right here on Guitar MD.